Because
you know, I really find the whole thing so mind-opening. You know, what the Prasangika view seems to do is to push you a little further, a little further, a little further than what you're thinking, and it's sort of like by doing that, it sort of shines a light on what you're doing, and it shines a light on possibilities of different ways of thinking about things, and that's great.
it's great because that's what changes.
That's what changes.
It's what changes things.
Yeah.
And it's so easy to, you know, where our world is, like we just make all these assumptions because it's so crazy.
Yeah, I know.
And it's hard not to, you know, it's kind of like physics, it's going in this direction or it's
Yeah.
going in this direction. And it's.
And this is why I think a lot of people are just forsaking media,
Yeah.
because what the media has kind of done, wittingly or unwittingly, is they sort of are driving the population almost like cattle to a particular point of view, a particular set of facts or not facts, I don't know.
Right.
But people are sort of going, all right, there's all kinds of different information out there now. What's happening? What's actually happening? And you know, the whole left-right thing, it's just like a means by which to divide people. And I think that's a big mistake too. I think we just sort of get out of that and go.
That's probably intentional. I mean, I think that's intentional.
Well, I mean, this is how you can, I mean, what's that, the whole, it goes back to the Romans and earlier, divide and conquer. That's how you do it.
Right.
That's how you control something.
Right.
Right, and then I mean, the more you open your mind, the weirder it gets. So. All right. It is time. We will start. Yes. Okay. Welcome, JCB.
Whatever Karen we are.
Yeah. Okay, let's we'll go ahead and just start with our prayers.
What does that mean?
I like that way you can just slide your push your cup in a chair on that. All right. Let's just go through these. Taking refuge in generating bodhicitta, the four immeasurables, the 7-limb prayer, and the mandala offering. Sangye chodang soki chognam la jangchu bardu dakni syakyu daki jinso kipe sonam ki rola penchir sangye druparto sangye chodang soki chognam la Jangchu bardu dagni kyapsuchi daki jinso gipe sonamgi rola penshir sangye druparsho sangye chadang suki choknam la Jangchu bardu dagni kyapsuchi Daki jinso gipe sonamki rola penshir sangye drupastu. And then we think of all sentient beings, humans, non-humans, animals, and anything else that might be out there with a consciousness, and we say these four immeasurable thoughts. May all sentient beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all sentient beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all sentient beings be inseparable from the happiness that is free from suffering. May all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free from attachment for friends and hatred for enemies. And, you know, as we become familiar with the Bodhisattva path, we become familiar with what it means to have this mind of enlightenment that is working towards Buddhahood for the benefit of all sentient beings. We start to feel as if, you know, yeah, I think my feeling is I'm feeling like I'm on that path now. I feel like I'm on that path. I feel like the whole lineage of our teachers and their teachers and the lineage that goes back and back is now part of a lineage that is informing my view and my choices and how I behave and view others and the world. So these four immeasurable thoughts, when you say these thoughts with that in mind, you're also when you finish saying them, I myself will do this. I will be part of this lineage, and I will take it upon myself to be of benefit, to do what it takes. And may I have the inspiration of my teachers and the Buddhas and all the Bodhisattvas that I can have the power to do this. And we start then thinking in those terms, and the path begins to really take shape. It really becomes it changes the way you view all sentient beings, and you become much more in tune with them. I know, people like Teresa, you're very connected with animals, and by doing that, you can see the connection that we all have, and that is part of a bodhisattva path, the kind of thing you're doing. It really is. The thing, then you extend it to like the sugar ants on the counter, because they care too, and the flies in the house and all of that stuff. You begin to do that, and that by doing that, you create this propensity to keep doing that, to be a benefit. So these are really great prayers when you go into them. All right, 7-limb prayer is we now just imagine that all of our teachers, our gurus, Buddhas, all the assembly of bodhisattvas, any teacher in our past who has been a benefit to us, doesn't have to be a Buddhist teacher, any teacher that has benefited us and brought us to where we are now, you put them there. And then you say these.
I think of it as the captain and the upper level crew on the massive cosmic ship that we're traveling on throughout the cosmos.
I like the way you're thinking. We're on a big cosmic ship.
We have
It's my ship.
we have our it's their ship.
My ship has sails that are made of emptiness. Okay. All right. So we visualize all that in front of us, and we say the 7-limb prayer. Reverently, I prostrate with my body, speech, and mind, and present clouds of every type of offering, actual and mentally transformed. I declare all my negative actions accumulated since beginningless time, and rejoice in the merits of all holy and ordinary beings. Please remain until samsara ends, and turn the wheel of dharma for sentient beings. I dedicate the merit created by myself and others to the great enlightenment, which is, the enlightenment for all sentient beings.
Show and tell.
Show and tell. You want me to turn this around?
No. Okay, you can't really see it that clearly, but this is the Starship Enterprise. See, the two little side things and those round things. That's our lineage, gurus.
I knew
That's
Kavita thinks it actually looks like the Starship Enterprise. It has a big thing in the middle, and then
Let me just say
side.
that it even looks like the human body, the abdomen, the lungs, of the spinal column,
Yes.
and it
It's
also
reminiscent of a lot of things.
So I just wanted to share that with you, that this
Let me
has
get
come
this.
upon me after years of
it
deep contemplation.
hit her like a ton of bricks. The Starship Enterprise.
Well, I'm gonna just add a little bit. I know we're in the middle of our prayer.
I know, but
Given that everything is dependent arising, given that it's appearance and reality, and given that our minds are the ones deciding what the appearance is going to look like.
how we're
So
going to decode it.
essentially, we are collectively agreeing, we like the vision of reality that the Buddha and his crew have laid forth of, ultimate compassion, blah, blah.
So we want to be on that mandala
So
spaceship.
that's the space.
So this
And
next,
there is nothing else.
this next,
It's all gonna be up for grabs in your
this
existence.
next prayer is the mandala offering. So visualize, think of this is mandala that we want to be on. This is the reality that we, in this lineage, in this path, we are visualizing and saying, this is what we're going to do. Sajipaki Jukshin Meto Tramri Rablingji Nidege Sangye Shindu Mi Deulaki Drokun Amda Chinga Chepasho Idam Guru Ratnamandalatam Yiriataya. Okay. Well, you know, prayers are they're sort of like that you can open up all sorts of teachings within the prayers themselves. Oh yeah, and then there's this Yedamahetu mantra and the stanza from Nagarjuna that Geshe Nima has asked us to recite whenever we're talking about emptiness. And boy, are we talking about emptiness in these classes. So I'll just read a translation of what's being said in this Sanskrit mantra, Yedamahetu. Those phenomena, all phenomena which arise from causes, I mean, all phenomena, both negative and positive, all phenomena arise from causes. And the Buddha has told us what those causes are. The Buddha has told us what causes suffering, and the Buddha has clearly told us what causes the release from suffering. So it's up to us to sort of look at that and study it and logically decide, is the Buddha correct? The Buddha's never saying, trust me, just have blind faith in me. The Buddha always said, figure this out for yourself. I'm showing you what I have found, but you need to find this for yourself. So the Buddha has also told what causes the cessation. What's the cessation of all these? How do you put an end to these causes that will cause suffering? And this is what he has taught, and may there be a blessing on it. So this is what this particular mantra is saying. Om ye dharma hetu prabhava, hetu tesham tatagato hyavadat, tesham chayo niroda, evam vahimaha shramanana soha. And then Nagarjuna, I forget which century Nagarjuna was in. I think maybe it was like the second or third or something like that. I don't know. He's considered to be the greatest teacher and exponent of the view of emptiness, and still, I mean, all of the great teachers and gurus refer to Nagarjuna. And so this fundamental wisdom of the middle way is a treatise that he wrote about this middle way view, this view of emptiness. And here's what he says: by extinguishing actions and afflictions, there is liberation. Actions and afflictions arise from misconceptions, and misconceptions arise from elaborations. Elaborations will cease through cultivating emptiness. And basically the misconceptions he's talking about, and conceptual elaborations he's talking about, is our primordial view and feeling that things actually exist independently. This is the way they seem to appear to us.
A different phrase that I'm gonna, that little excerpt to me can be a little bit problematic for our minds because of the words used. It makes it sound like actions are bad and you shouldn't do anything, you know.
He's talking about actions that will lead to,
and don't forget
suffering.
that karma is translated more accurately in English, just action. So probably the word, well, it would have had to be because they don't
Karma, yeah, it would have been karma.
But he has another phrase that we were taught to memorize or instructed to memorize by Geshe Drakpa. It says that whatever is dependently co-arisen, that is emptiness. That phenomenon, being a dependent designation, is what we call a middle way. So it's, appearance and reality,
Right.
dependent. And then he goes, whatever is not dependently co-arisen. Whatever is not dependently co-arisen. So,
Something that exists independently.
such a thing does not exist. Therefore, a non-empty thing does not exist. period, end of story. So anywhere in the universe, there's nothing other than
Right.
phenomena that are co-arisen.
And that again is Nagarjuna.
I mean, one of the things is we talk about this, and I think I know what I do is even like I've shared before when Robina would say, Venerable Robina would say, we're nothing but a bunch of habits. I kind of think of that as sort of a informal way of saying, wow, we've got a lot of habits. Well, what she's literally saying is, we are nothing but a bunch of habits. There's nothing else. There's no other cogito.
There's just propensities,
There's just a bunch of
habitual
habits.
propensities.
And so similarly, when we think of emptiness, we think, oh yeah, things are empty of inherent existence, things are interdependent, things are co-arising, blah, blah. There must be something out there that's other than that. And so Nagarjuna, in this other section of the fundamental wisdom, the middle way, is pointing out there is nothing.
I remember when Geshe Drakpa was teaching when we were, and it was just early on in our studies, maybe the first year or so. And he was a very good teacher, and he was explaining emptiness, and he posed the question to everybody. He says, "Do you think the Buddha is empty of inherent existence?" And it was it made us all pause, and I had to logically think of what Geshe Drakpa had been saying, because my first reaction would be, "Oh no, the Buddha actually exists." That was my first reaction, and then no, the Buddha itself. The Buddha is a dependently arising entity, you could say.
I know
it has causes and conditions and the Buddha is constantly. He also asked the question: do you think the Buddha is permanent or impermanent? And my first thought was, oh no, permanent. The Buddha will be forever. There's no. And the answer was no. The Buddha is impermanent because the Buddha has the ability to constantly change for whatever situation comes up, to have the appropriate way of benefiting. And you can't do that if you are truly a permanent thing. There's no change that will occur. So our views of permanent and impermanence got really shifted by our study of Buddhism. Because we have this view where we wanted to think that everything exists inherently and solidly, including myself. When we hear permanent, we think that's the good thing, and we hear impermanent. Oh no, I don't like that. It means it's going to end. But it just means it's going to change, and that's actually a really great thing.
But because the Buddha is arisen, dependently arisen from all of us, it's an example of our capability. I mean, it's that's why it's so attainable, because it's actually arisen from all of us collectively.
The Buddha has said any being that has a consciousness can become an enlightened being. So this is why I say the tiniest sugar ants on the kitchen counter. When you start looking at it that way, you sort of go, well, maybe I just don't want to kill them. Maybe I just don't want to wipe the sponge and kill them. Maybe I want to sort of develop the habit of seeing them as sentient beings that could eventually, achieve this freedom from suffering and omniscience. And so you kind of want to be part of that.
Yeah, I mean, like on that particular example, even just from it being a sugar ant, Lama Zopa had a very powerful statement that I love, and I've mentioned it before, but the sugar ant may be nothing to you. It's life, it's life of that sugar ant, and there's, dozens of them on our counter. And
it's so easy to just.
It's not, what does it mean to you? But to each one of those tiny ants, their life is everything. And it's rather heart-wrenching when you think about how easily we just arrogantly kill.
Yeah, especially we think the smaller it is, what does it matter? And this is all relative. And when you start to think along these terms, you really start to change the patterns of your thinking. And what winds up is you become more compassionate. You become more accepting. As a matter of fact, I'm at the point where I think we just need to cut everybody slack, because whether they are the most vicious, horrible people we can imagine, it's due to their ignorance and misunderstanding of the way things exist. And they are suffering. Not only are they causing others suffering, but they can't be happy themselves. And the effects of what they're doing is going to cause them great suffering. So the only really correct response is compassion. And how can you be of help? In what way can you be of help? And it's not always that easy.
And for ourselves too.
Yeah.
Because it's easy to see somebody else and think, oh, but they're suffering and we don't even know our blinders.
Yeah, right.
I mean, we have an idea because we have a path that's been presented for us. But the reality is we're not there.
No, we're not there. And
so we screw up or what, I mean,
yeah.
And we'll bumble along the way.
Right.
And suffer when we really screw up. I mean, it's just part of the deal.
And I don't think we should condemn ourselves because of that, Like I said, I cut everybody, including yourself, some slack, because this is a big thing we're working on. They're saying since beginningless time, we have had instinctively this mistaken view of the way things exist, and it's a huge habit. And so to turn that habit around into something that is the opposite of it is a big thing that's going to take a lot of time and a lot of effort. The Holiness says if you can develop bodhicitta, this wish to become enlightened for the benefit of all beings, and that bodhicitta becomes genuine, he says you can fast track it. I mean, you can go through this thing that seems like it's going to take for eons. You can go through it pretty quickly. If you really, put your mind to it and have that genuine sense of bodhicitta. And you can see it develop in yourself as you move along this path.
One of the benefits to my mind of this Starship Enterprise metaphor, because I think of the universe and the massive, chaotic, in a neutral sense, just the fact that the universe as a thing is not organized particularly. And so as sentient beings, or as cognizing beings, we exist, and we are constantly, as you can watch yourself, you can make any decision you want anytime about anything. Teresa's moving to Massachusetts. Seems to us like a big bold move, but every single day we could do stuff like that. So the thing about feeling like you're on this is leading towards bodhicitta, by the way. The thing about feeling, if you've ever been on a boat, just imagine you're on a boat, a very nice boat with a very trustworthy captain and a great crew, and you're happy and safe and great, and you really are pleased with your destination. And you're aware that there are a lot of people in the water who do not have such a boat. I can sort of just automatically generate sort of the wish, I know I can't force them to get on this boat, any boat. By the way, this is not about Buddhism as such.
Yeah.
I think beings in general just are happier if they feel some kind of trajectory for their existence. So you have this choice. If you do not have a trajectory for your existence, all you're left with is following your attachments, either your attachment aversion matrix, this thing. So it's it's propelling you. It never propels you into the bodhicitta, altruistic, because you're constantly just trying in this chaotic soup to be happy in ways that you understand you can be. So I just find that, so it just automatically, it's like I imagine myself on a very trustworthy ship, the Mahayana boat, and think, as a practitioner, and again, this is not meant to be sectarian or Buddhist in particular, but as a practitioner, may I do things and be an example and encourage others to similarly find a ship, that saves them from, when you peel down, it's rather horrifying and terrifying what we go through. You just have good coping mechanisms. But
it's interesting. The name Mahayana actually means great vehicle. So it's a vehicle, like a boat.
And that's a very generous. That's being compassionate and generous. Just having that view that you want other people in the water.
I know none of us, I don't know a single human being that wouldn't want to help other people who are in the water.
Right.
So you
Some of
gotta
these
be
ones that we have to
willing
cut some
tap
slack out
into
of.
that. And as you, I mean, it's sort of a little mental trick, but you can just sort of habituate yourself to going, yeah, you know, I mean.
Yeah.
Well,
I've known you many, many years. You've always been a really good example of a poised person who has a positive outlook, who stays buoyant. You seem to work, I don't mean this in a negative way or a hard way, you seem to work hard to be a positive. When you come into a room or an environment, you raise it up a bit. I've never been anywhere where you've caused the room to go down.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, so these are the kind of things that we just automatically. I think it's just an indication of our spontaneous wish to raise things up.
Well, I mean, if you think about it, every being wants to be happy. They just, like you said, I mean, you can't think of a sentient being who would want to help people who are, in the water, but a shark would definitely want to eat them, So it just depends on where you're at and what you see as beneficial. It's
I didn't say sentient being, I really meant human being.
Oh, you meant human being? Okay.
I don't know.
Okay, so we'll do a little recap and then get to what
I'm sure there are sadistic humans, I don't know.
we are still on, we're on chapter 9, we're on what I'm calling part 6. Last week was 6.1, this is 6.2. We discussed how even cutting edge neuroscience now and physics are coming to a similar conclusions that there is no that the Prasangika view has come to, that there is no reality out there in and of itself. That reality itself depends on the kind of science will say this is just a bunch of waveforms and frequencies, microwave frequencies, and all kinds of different things, quantum fields that are, it's just like a big soup, and whatever your particular way of decoding it is will give you a particular version of the frequency that's an aspect of that frequency, but in no way are you taking in the entire thing that's there. And science now knows this, and so science is saying, well, there is no self-existent reality. It is a dependent kind of arising. It's depending on who's viewing it. It's depending on all the various frequencies, the soup that's out there. So even science has come to this view of dependent arising that the Prasangikas came to centuries ago. The danger that we have with science as opposed to the Buddhist view and the Mahayana view, which is always for the benefit of other beings, and it's overcoming this view of inherent existence, the self-ego grasping. Well, when you have science that has this view, but there still is this ego self-grasping, even Brian Herman is sort of working on this, grappling with he wrote a book about ethics now in science, and that for the most part, I mean, he believes that scientists are ethical, but it only takes a few who aren't, and the corporations that are backing them to produce some kind of science that actually is phony or not beneficial.
Well, it's
serving them. It's serving the scientists. It's serving the corporations. They're making money, in other words. And so it's this grasping that causes, when you don't have the view of emptiness, you can have a view of things are dependently arising, and you go, oh, how can I manipulate this? Or you can say things are dependently arising, therefore they don't exist inherently, therefore there is no inherently existing me or mine or ego. And this from out of this, the Buddha came with the view of compassion and wanting to be a benefit, because it can see that we're all interconnected. This is where an ego self-grasping person who could see that things are dependently arising, but was not taking the leap to going, and I'm connected to that and it matters. whether things are functioning well or not, and it's just what can I get out of it for myself. This is where science can be a problem, and I know Brian Herman is thinking about that, and because this is what he has to teach at the University of Minnesota is ethics in science. So Buddhism has, caused him to think a lot more about that, and how he's written a whole book, and it's interesting to read it. Okay, but Buddhism says that consciousness doesn't. Current science is saying, because they can't prove it in anything else. So they're just assuming that consciousness comes from matter. Consciousness comes from the brain, and Buddhism says no. Consciousness is not matter. Consciousness is clear and knowing, and it's not matter. So we covered that. Then we got into this. Why do we have a strong? Why do we develop this strong desire and grasping and attachment for things that, because they're actually really dependent arisings, they don't actually exist inherently, and in that sense they're illusion-like? Why are we still grasping at them? And the answer, he used an example of a magician grasping at the mirage of a woman that he creates, even knowing that it's an illusion. And then I use the example of pictures on the internet or things on the internet that we know they're not real. They're just pictures and pixels, but we still grasp onto them as if they were real. We're still attracted and attached to them, and that's because we have developed this propensity, this habit, since beginningless time to be grasping at things as if they exist inherently, and that's why we do that. And it's such a strong habit that we just automatically do it without even if we know that it's not, quote unquote real, we still get involved in it. We still grasp at it, all of that. And that's why we do it. It's the habit, as Kavita said.
Weird thing on Facebook, I joined a chat group that's discussing the TV series, The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, which ended a few months ago. And it's really fascinating. People are interacting and talking as if these were real people and real characters, and wondering about their history. And they're, in other words, they know it was a story, an illusion, a TV series, and yet their grasping is so strong, they don't even care.
It's the same as with look how people kids get wrapped up in video games, as if it's a whole actual real world. Wrapped up, totally drawn into
We
it.
see it in politics. Politics all the time get accused of things. It's easy to accuse, I forget it was Mark Twain, but even when it's proven to have been a false accusation, we still remember the accusation.
Yeah. Well, anyway,
this is why you see the headlines. So and so may have done this and such.
Yeah, but they don't say they did. May have. It's just by saying may have.
Watch the headlines. As Buddhists, we should be very skeptical and clear about what we're looking at.
Yeah. We also should be very clear about what we're saying too, how we express ourselves. The Buddhist says that even the world that we think is the real world is illusion-like, in that it is simply a dependently arising appearance based on the way our equipment can see things and what we're picking up, and so nothing is actually solid and real the way it seems to us. And this is where we start getting into the view of emptiness. All right, here's a great thing. Kavita found this
It was an
email, but it was on Facebook, and Lama Zopa, this is something Lama Zopa had said, and this is perfect. It ties in exactly with what we're talking about. And I've titled it "The Door is Always Open." And Lama Zopa Rinpoche says that we've been completely trapped in a kind of hallucination, by allowing our ignorance to sort of lead us by the nose, so to speak, and not thinking about emptiness. We continuously create the cause for more hallucination in the future. And then he uses this great analogy that we can all relate to. I certainly can. He says, we're like a fly inside a house where there are windows and doors that are open, but the fly doesn't go out through them. How often have we seen this? I mean, we've even tried to help the flies, you know, hey, we're gonna raise this window up, come on, fly, go out, and they're just, no. You know, so the fly doesn't go out through them, it doesn't go to where there is an opening, but keeps bumping up against the closed windows over and over again, not taking advantage of the freedom offered by all the open windows and doors. No one is keeping the fly trapped in the house. The fly stays there all on its own. Even though there's plenty of space in which it can escape, the fly only looks where there is no escape and flies around and around. It would be so easy to get out. There would be no hardship involved at all in it. Still, it doesn't do that, but the door is always open. Lama Zopa says our lives are just like this example. The door of opportunity to attain liberation from the suffering of cyclic existence is always there, always open. All phenomena, which include the I, the actions that the I takes, and all the objects that are the actions that the I of what the I is saying. They call it the three spheres: agent, object, and action. So you have the I, the object of the I, and the actions that the I takes in relation to that object. He's saying all of those have been empty since beginningless time. They are dependently arising phenomena. They're not inherently existent. It's not as if those phenomena have been empty at some times and inherently existent at others. They've never been inherently existent. The opportunity to realize emptiness has always been there and always will be. When we're able to generate that realization of emptiness, we will eliminate the root of samsara, which is the ignorance that grasps at the conception of an independent, self-existent ego, the I, and independent, self-existent, all other phenomena existing that way as well. But the ego is at the base. It's at the basis of all of cyclic existence. It's the ignorance of the ego. By eliminating the root ignorance, everything that stems from that root will come to an end. All of our disturbing and afflictive emotions, all of the harmful and destructive actions that arise from those disturbing emotions, and the karma, the negative karma generated by those actions, which keeps us in cyclic existence over and over and over again. We will attain, it's like the fly going around in circles. We will attain the complete cessation of suffering and its causes, even though the opportunity to liberate ourselves from all of this has always been there. So far, we haven't taken that opportunity. Even though it's always been there, the door's open. So, like the fly, we haven't paid attention or turned toward the door of liberation, which is the realization of emptiness. Emptiness is the very nature of all phenomena and is the object of wisdom. But we continuously follow our ignorance and keep circling around towards suffering because we believe the view of ignorance and think that the object of ignorance, inherent self-existence, which is false, is actually true. Lama Zopa says this has been our fundamental mistake. And I thought that was just like the greatest analogy. You know, I mean, what's so great about it is we've had the experience of life. And so we can, when we think of that now, we can think of our experience, you know, being trapped here in samsara, and yet we're not actually really trapped. The way to liberation has always been open for us. We just don't turn towards it.
You know what comes to mind when I love this fly analogy, is that even the the collective thought of the door being out there, it's like the fly buzzing around. It's not there, it's not the door or the wall you hit, it's like in here in every moment. Does that make sense? And that's the open window is, it's like we're not going towards it, even though we're on a path, we're on a ship, we're going.
Right.
And it's like in every moment. You know, and I only say that from kind of an experiential yogi method, because you know, when you do the mind body stuff, it gets you out of your thoughts.
Right.
So you just start having an experiential, true nature. I mean, as true as it can get of, it's not a door, it's not a wall, it's you're just kind of existing
Right.
in your true nature.
Yeah.
But even think of the door, but that's what we did.
Those are analogies, right? The ship, the door,
That's what we do.
that's why it
And
helps
it's
us.
easy to understand because that's what we do.
But then we have to turn it inside. It's like you're saying, it is within our own consciousness where we're going to find this.
Yeah.
You know, we have the help, we have the assistance from others who have done it.
Yeah.
This is what the Buddha is. The Buddha is like a doctor who knows how to fix the problem. And are we going to turn towards that doctor or not? But first of all, we have to develop trust in the doctor.
Right.
You know. And that's part of what we're going through now. I mean, as we logically examine what the Buddha has said and decide for ourselves whether this is true for ourselves, not just because somebody said it. I mean, it's very easy to go, I mean, how many times have you heard people say something like, it's all an illusion, so it doesn't matter. I mean, this is like I don't know what it is, a new agey kind of thought that has been out there that everything's an illusion, but people don't take it any further than that. It's an illusion, therefore it doesn't matter. So no matter what I do, it doesn't matter. Well, that's headed towards nihilism. And that is not a correct view. That's not what the Buddha is saying when he's saying things are illusion-like. You know, an illusion, it's just, people aren't using their logic. They're just parroting a phrase they've heard. And then kind of following that and justifying their behavior that you could do whatever they want because it's just all an illusion. And that's not going to work. Because that's not the way karma works. It does make a difference what we do. It does make a difference what our actions are.
I think one of the New Age sayings that turns out to be accurate is you create your own reality.
Yeah, it's true. Well,
just to give you, not everything New Age turned out to be
no, I mean, I think the New Age movement had a very noble beginning to it. I mean, the intention was there. It just sort of there wasn't enough real true wisdom that was coming out of it. You know, it just became kind of sort of.
It was spotty. Let's
Yeah.
say it was here and there. And
Yeah, it wasn't. Yeah.
I mean, I think one of the a lot of us, and especially we're in our 60s, and so I'm 67. I think we're about the same age. We came up through a time where it would have been very easy to just take a ego grasping, self-serving approach to the New Age thoughts that were coming out there, and it's sort of Eastern. But there was a percentage of people who got interested in it, who didn't just start smoking dope and growing pot and hanging out and enjoying everything as illusion. They actually went, what does this mean? And, turn to disciplines such as yoga or meditation, or,
Right.
So there's like a funny thing that happened, and probably the underlying thing is you're either sick of wandering through your existence without, just being led by your nose, attachment and aversion, or you're like, okay, maybe there's another.
Yeah, I mean, I would say I would agree. I mean, it's actually our suffering that causes us to turn towards something. There must be something that works, right? And this is what causes us to turn toward a path such as Buddhism that has a very strong lineage and a very strong view of the way things exist. And then it's up to us to analyze that view. So this whole thing about emptiness and meditating on emptiness, by meditating on emptiness, we can remove all the delusions in our mind stream and all the imprints of those delusions in our mind stream. But I don't want to just repeat what we did. I'm just going to sort of covering what His Holiness the Dalai Lama says, that we have to habitually build up an aptitude for understanding emptiness by logically perceiving all things as empty of any kind of independent self-existence. Then we have to experientially realize that. And then we have to repeat this experience again and again And then the strong propensity that we have for grasping onto self-established inherent existence can be dispelled. But it takes great familiarity with emptiness before we can deconstruct our mistaken views about how everything exists and stop believing in our mistaken views. So the thing that His Holiness is saying here, it's not just, you can't just hear that things are empty of inherent existence and go, yeah, that makes sense. I logically see that, blah, blah, blah. He says you have to repeatedly and habitually begin to look at things this way, think about things this way. I mean, the word that the Tibetans use, the word for meditation is gom, is it not? Gom, and gom means to familiarize yourself with something. So when they're talking, when the Buddhists are talking about meditation, they're talking about becoming familiar with something. The more we familiarize ourselves with something, we know this from anything we've done, anything we've learned how to do, any kind of practice we've done, any discipline that we've engaged in. Initially, we can sort of understand, I can understand the concept when I was little of, all right, to play the piano, you have to put your hands on the keys, fingers on the keys, and you have to learn how to read those notes and what they mean. So from the outset what it is you're supposed to do, even when you're 6 years old. But it takes going over it again and again and again and again. And any sport is like this. You understand what the purpose, the goal is of a particular sport. I have to swim these laps back and forth as fast as I can so I can win the race, or I have to put the ball in the hoop for playing basketball. But you can't just do it. You have to familiarize yourself with it. You have to practice it until you become expert at it.
Okay, with regard to practice, so we tend to over complexify things. And the meditation on emptiness is available. It's like the open window. It's just like right in your face. It doesn't have to be fancy, and you can do this a jillion times a day. You can take a placemat. I mean, and this is an analysis. This is how you meditate on emptiness. You go, okay, here's a placemat. Did it arise? I think I think of this as this complex, concrete thing, a placemat. And it just feels like there it is. It's so then the avenue into emptiness is to contemplate the dependent arising nature of it. You can start with just somebody had to get the fabric, someone had to design it, they made the fabric, they sewed it, it went to the store, someone sold it.
The dye, all of it.
But you have to go further, then you can get into the molecular structure of the thread and all the various elements on the planet that are required to grow the cotton. This happens to be cotton. But you can go further and go, okay, I as a human being, I have labeled this as a placemat based on my conditioning, and from its side, it's all this interaction with sentient beings and the elements that are co-arising to create this thing that I, because of my conditioning and where I am, and people, beings with my shared conventional view of things, all agree this is a placemat. But from its side is empty of anything, empty of existing either as a placemat or as its object. So you take all that kind of analysis on any ordinary thing, and therefore it's empty of inherent existence, intrinsically exists. It does not exist from its own side.
Right.
Then, you can even get a whiff of it. It's like, then you can see that it is illusion-like because it's completely dependent on your sense faculties right now, you as the observer. It's not like you have to go a mountain.
It's actually completely dependent on the label we give it as well.
So would that help you detect with that?
Well, yeah.
Eventually, the thing he said, that His Holiness is saying, you have to do this over and over and over again, so that our
it doesn't, the accessibility of doing it over and over and over again throughout the day is right there.
Our problem is that we are from time immemorial habituated to seeing and experience everything as if it does exist independently and inherently. And so the only way to counteract that is to create a new habit and repeat that habit over and over and over again, so that we start to familiarize ourselves with seeing things in a different way. But it has to be logical. We have to use our logic and reason and go, this way that the Buddha is saying that we to actually habituate ourselves to see is actually correct. It's logically correct. The other way is illogical when you take into all of those factors that Kavita was talking about, all those dependently arising factors that bring a particular thing like a placemat into our view, but the placemat from its own side doesn't even know it's a placemat. It doesn't even exist as a placemat. We just label it that, we're calling it that, we're giving it that function. All of these things came together in our experience to, when we say that's a couch, that's a placemat.
Yeah, I mean, the
But
reason
you-
I brought that up is just to make it.
Right, the point of this is that we must habituate ourselves to seeing this to seeing everything in this dependently arising way.
But also-
I like the movie scenario where you are watching a movie and you're just aware it's not really happening, but you can lose yourself in the movie and really experience it, as long as you kind of keep that thing in the back of your mind that this is just a dream, it's just a movie. It's
Right.
not- But you
I
can still
remember,
enjoy it. You can
I
still
think-
enjoy it and play along with it as if it was, but knowing.
Yeah,
I think that's the key bit for me, was knowing it's not, but still allowing yourself to experience it, and
Yeah.
having a thread of, coming out, knowing it's just an illusion, like looking at the mirror, it's just a reflection. It's not real, but you're in it and you can experience it and enjoy it and get scared and get happy, but it's not real.
yeah.
Well, I mean,
That could be a difficult one with the scary things.
The sentient being, we are always going to be experiencing something, no matter whether we're an ordinary being or a Buddha. We're going to be experiencing something.
And I think it's
Good point.
all this thing, the mind plays the big role, right? So if I'm analyzing, saying I've learned it from Buddhism literature or listening to Chris, if my mind is analyzing this, that's not good. But that has to be something that comes from within to feel, right? Because the mind is the culprit.
Well, we have to analyze initially.
Right.
We do have to use our logic. We have to analyze, and eventually the whole point of meditating on emptiness is to get to a non-analytical experience.
Correct.
Yeah.
That's what I'm
That's-
saying.
But we start out using our logic, using our analysis.
That is why they spend so many years studying logic, so that they can do faultless analysis. That
So I wanna-
leads to going out.
Analytical is the end.
So going on with what he says, if we can perceive the absence of an inherent, built-in, essential nature in all phenomena, then when phenomena appear, they can be seen as deceptive or not truly existent in the way we've previously been conditioned to think of them. As a result, when we look upon or experience what seems to us to be attractive or repulsive, an attachment or aversion toward these things arises, we can actually ascertain that they do not truly exist in the way they appear to us. This will gradually diminish the occurrence of our attachment and aversion, both of which result from conceiving objects, situations, and events as existing in the manner in which they appear to us. This false way of apprehending things has been with us since time without beginning, which is why we must be persistent and habitual in our practice of familiarizing ourselves with the view of emptiness. One of the things about definitely about attachment, when we have attachment to things, we don't necessarily want to let go of those attachments. We don't understand that by seeing those things that we are so attached to as being inherently real, when that thing, ultimately we won't be able to have it, it will be gone. it's going to cause us a great deal of pain, especially say we're attached to someone we love dearly, our mother or something like that, who've been, so close to us, and we are very attached. Well, that attachment, even though we're drawn to it and attached, it actually causes us suffering. If we could have a more realistic view of our relationships, a much more realistic view that is a dependently arising thing, and it flows and it changes, we would be able to let go in ways that are not, it would be completely compassionate, it would be completely loving, but it wouldn't be grasping. It wouldn't be this grasping attachment, which is what causes, this is why attachment causes suffering, and the same for aversion, for fear, if we were able to let go of thinking of the thing that we're afraid of as being this concrete, awful, terrible thing, and when Susie mentioned the thing about movies, I remember seeing I think it was a documentary on when the first movies came out, I think in the teens, the 1900s. And there was they were doing all of this stuff that was just thrilling people, right? But they had a movie where there was a train, and it was you were, the track was way up close to you in the theater. So you're looking at this big track, and the train is in the distance, right? And the train is coming towards you, and the train then fills up the whole screen. Well, people actually ran out of the theater when that first happened, because they'd never experienced something like that and thought, my God, is it actually going to hit us? So this is a great example. The movie example that Susie brought up is a great example, because that thing actually wasn't real, but their experience of it, because they have the habitual experience of seeing things like that as being real, it was real to them, and people ran out of the theater. And this is why we get frightened or totally wrapped up or attached or excited by a movie or a picture or a video or whatever. Yeah. And we do the same thing with all of this. This is actually not really different. All of this is a dependent arising, and in and of itself, it has no independent existence, none of it. And basically, His Holiness's point is we have to habituate ourselves to that thought, and we have to practice it on a kind of a regular basis, just even in our daily life. The thing to remember, say like with sentient beings, or like the sugar ants, or any being like that, even though it is a dependent arising, it doesn't exist inherently, and therefore it's not truly, you could say, truly existent. The being, however, still experiences suffering and pleasure, still wants to be happy, doesn't want to suffer. So this is why you don't want to kill the sugar ant. Why you want to allow that to have a life, and at the same time make intentions or say prayers or wishes that ant can continue to grow, have a better and better future existence, and that consciousness will eventually find the way out, the door that's open. And this is because suffering, what the Four Noble Truths, the first one the Buddha said, suffering is. There is suffering. We actually experience it. You cannot deny that there's suffering. And so there's a cause for that. And the cause for the suffering is seeing things, experiencing things, and seeing things as if they exist inherently. And that is basically an ignorant view. So he's saying the cause of suffering is ignorance. The ignorance of how things actually exist. So the Buddha's first and foremost is about being happy and not suffering. That's what this is all about. It's not just to go, wow, emptiness is cool, isn't it? Things don't really exist the way they appear, dude. This is a key to not suffering. This is the key to how to be happy, and that's why it's so important. Additionally, when we realize, then last week we talked about the emptiness of emptiness itself, and so this is an important thing that we have to grasp. Because we're so habituated to seeing everything as being some kind of inherently existing thing, when we hear, it's like when we see the movie. When we see the movie and the train coming down the track, even though we know we're being told this is just a movie, we go, that's a real thing, get me out of here. So when we're told about emptiness and having experience of emptiness, and that we have to meditate and have a realization of emptiness, our default mode is to think, emptiness is this thing. It's this thing that I have to attain. It's this thing that I have to experience. It's something that's out there, and it's going to have some kind of appearance. It's going to look like something, you know.
Like a door.
Yeah, it's right. It's like what you were saying, that emptiness is actually the door or something like that.
Yeah.
And His Holiness is saying that is not, the Buddha is saying that's not what it is. So we have to get this concept going in our minds about the emptiness of emptiness itself. So that and the analogy that we gave last week is commonly used, and it's a really good analogy, is that it's like you have a drawer in your house or kitchen or somewhere where you always put your keys, and you always expect to find your keys there. And one day you open up the drawer and the keys aren't there. And so what you're experiencing is no keys. There's just a lack of keys. It's not that there's something there that's saying, this is the emptiness of the keys, aha, and a light flashes. It's just a lack. Now, what can happen is if we have not habitually thought of the emptiness itself is empty. In the same way, when we open the door and find that our keys aren't there, and to us those keys are very important. They could be our car keys, our house keys. We panic. Like, where are they? I know that they should be there. Where are they? So what will happen with us if we haven't thought and analyzed about this, the emptiness of emptiness, when we actually have a direct realization of emptiness, we may panic and think, I'm not going to exist anymore. And that's not the case at all. A realization doesn't mean a realization that we don't exist. That's not the case at all. It means it's a realization that nothing, including our consciousness, doesn't exist inherently. It exists interconnectedly. It exists interdependently. That's the realization. And it's empty of anything other than that. It's empty of existing inherently. Basically, the inherent existence is the object of refutation when you are meditating on emptiness. This is what you're refuting, is
so
inherent existence.
When you're analyzing your phone, you're trying to refute its
Inherent existence, right.
So,
So you pull it
you
apart.
do all
all
that
the,
analysis, and you go, oh.
And it's not just the physical thing and all the things that it's made of. It's actually the way how it appears to us, how we label it, how we view it, how we all have a consensus that this is what it is and what it's for. And that's all fine. That's called conventional reality. Conventional reality is important. It enables us to function and to have things work, but we need to realize that this doesn't exist inherently the way we think it does. This is where we get hung up and we get into all kinds of trouble. This is how our afflictive emotions arise, because things don't appear to us or act in the way that we think they should or want them to, and we get bent out of shape, and then we get angry, and then we fight with the people we live in, and then the relationship breaks up, and all of this stuff goes on, and it just causes unhappiness. And it's all based on seeing things as existing inherently, including ourself, including the me, the I, the ego. So it's a way of actually kind of loosening up. If you open up into interconnectedness, if you open up into interdependence, feel as if you're part of something that is fluid and flowing, and you want to be a beneficial part of that. Well, it's going to change the way you view things. It's going to change the way you behave. It's going to change the way you interact. You're not going to get necessarily pissed off at somebody because of what they said, because you're going to understand, well, this is just the way I'm interpreting it. But from, obviously there's something going on that's, causing a problem with this person. How can I be of help rather than damn you, And so that's going to take practice. That is going to take practice, because that's not our default mode. Our default mode is to put up the fist and fight. Ask me.
I find that really interesting in a little online course I did that was about perception, working with perceptions, how every being has their own singular perception due to their causes, conditions, life, shit that's thrown at them, how they have reacted to it, who they've been hanging out with, what they've been listening to. Every single being is going to have a slight different perception of everything. So it can't really exist. How you see that cannot exist truly, because everybody's got nanosecond different view of that due to their causes and conditions they've lived through.
That is so true, isn't it? I mean, when you actually think
And how
about
can that be real? Because everybody is a little bit different. So it can't be real, is how it kind of hit me.
you know, that kind of brings me to the current craziness of what our political
Yeah.
structure is in all over the world, actually, so that you can have a whole group of people who think, I won't even go into the names because the names themselves make people, flare up, who will think one candidate is just great. They love everything about that candidate. Yay, the savior of our country. And a whole other group of people will go, that candidate is just the worst thing that ever happened to this country. Get rid of that person. They can't both be right. They cannot both be correct. So you have two whole groups of people that then become divided towards one another based on this.
Nothing. Yeah.
They're good.
Yeah, well, and of course, the
Nobody
media
knows.
plays the
Yeah,
biggest part in
right.
all of it.
Yeah.
So it's
We
just
have all these layers of
Yeah.
hysteria based on information we're fed that we have no firsthand knowledge of, all based on headlines that say so and so may have done thus and such.
And as a
Well,
practicing Mahayana Buddhists, following the Prasangika view, we need to be very clear about that. We need to be very aware of that. We need to understand that we do not want to enter into this foray of division. We want to do the opposite. We want to see the commonality. And that's our task, not to get divided like that. And I even see this happening with Buddhists. Buddhist teachers even. I see it happening.
And what's interesting is this kind of relates to when I was doing some graduate classes and we were looking at the context was digital literacy, but starting with fundamental literacy, like the process of reading a text is something that we had evolved to do over hundreds and hundreds of years. We weren't born to read. We were born to take visual stimuli and react to it. Like the fight or flight, you see a saber-toothed tiger, you run, that kind of thing. And so we've developed the ability to read, but in reading research, evidence shows that any individual will interpret a text differently, even if you had the same upbringing. It's because your prior knowledge is a huge factor in the interpretation of a text. And that's kind of been discounted, especially in the context of a standardized test. And so taking a reading test with a multiple choice answer is inherently biased, and it could be considered racist. It could be considered all sorts of things.
Oh, yeah.
Because you bring so much of what you already know about the world when you're reading a text. Whether it's an example of talking about mowing the lawn in the summer versus, drinking a Coca-Cola, whatever it is. So I think that's a good example of how what Susie was saying, your perception is so individualistic. That's the one sense that where it is kind of dependent on its own side, because it's all built up of these causes and conditions of you as an individual physical entity moving in space and time. So I just think that when I discovered that in this course, and I was like, oh my God, then why are we giving kids standardized tests? Because they're just completely not fair.
It'd be fine if we gave them also the time to develop shared understandings of something.
Yeah.
Or allow them to interpret it as they want to versus no, this
go.
is the correct answer.
There
This
you
is
go.
the one view you're supposed to have when you read this text.
What are we trying to teach children to do?
Yeah, maybe the whole
Oh my
education
God, don't
system
even
has
get
to
me
be,
started.
I know, really. There is, Buddhism does talk about conventional reality. There are certain things that we do all conventionally agree upon. Otherwise, we couldn't function. Society would collapse if we couldn't.
Societies would collapse.
Societies would collapse.
One good thing about travel, especially if you had a chance to go to exotic third world places, Nepal, the hills of, or like we've been to Bolivia and places like that, places where they don't do what we do. It can shake up your
it can add to your understanding of how subjective our conventions are. Oh yeah, that's a cup. Everybody knows it's a cup. You know, it's a cup. This is the real world. It's a cup. Get over it. Well, you know, somebody in Bolivia is holding a palm leaf or a banana leaf in a certain way that it holds liquids like, you know, those.
Well, you know,
Telling you,
basically,
yeah.
you
They
can
go,
do
why
that.
would you go to all that trouble?
You gotta-
The more we expand our awareness, the more we expand our conventional reality. You know, I mean, we take that all in. We don't reject it and say that's not. You know, of course, you know, anything that's going to hold the liquid for somebody to drink it. I mean, even if it's the palm of your hand, it's a cup of some sort. You cup your hand, you know. So it's, I mean, conventional reality is important. It's important in order for societies to function.
But you learn not to judge.
Mhm.
Because, you know,
Right.
saying this is right,
Right.
this is wrong, this culture's right, this is wrong.
Right.
You may wanna whine in a certain way, but to judge is, how do
Yeah.
you judge when someone is perceiving?
So it becomes a challenge to find the ways to educate, the ways to evaluate how well people are incorporating that education into their mind and behavior. How do you test for that? How do you do that in a way that works for everyone? And that becomes a challenge. But it's still, when that is achieved and it works, that will become a conventional reality. If it just doesn't work, then the whole system will fall apart. If the educational system can't figure out a way to evaluate the progress of students and how they're doing, then the whole system will fall apart. It will just be, well, whatever you say goes. And that's not how conventional reality
Probably our
works.
view of evaluate will.
Yeah. How do you actually evaluate
I mean,
it, right?
that's why I said.
Our tests even the
What do we
way.
want to teach kids?
Yeah.
Probably we want to teach them to think.
I think it's that
Ultimately,
tweaking
we want
of
kids to think.
how what our perception is again of how sweet that is that they're using their hand or a leaf to drink, and then others would be like, how gross, a china cup is what you meant.
Oh yeah.
And then you start tweaking it, and that is the beginning of suffering, isn't it? Because we're not able to accept that we want this, we're pushing that away and saying this is the right way, or you know, and that's where we cause our suffering, because we start narrowing it down.
Right. And we try and impose on others, you know, our particular view.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
It's really
like
interesting.
That's a pretty profound, what you just said, Susie, is really profound to me, that is the start of suffering, just a simple thing. It's like the swatting of the fly, or
And you're no longer relaxed and open because
Uh-huh.
you're holding that narrower view. And
Yeah.
that, even though we're like, oh, but this is going to make me happy because I like my china cup, it isn't, because it's narrowing you. Whereas what it should be is opening and not letting those things affect you and just observing them, like the movie thing. Okay, I'm in a movie. I know I'm in a movie. I'm just going to enjoy it, and I'm not going to go, watch out, nasty. No, just getting into it and enjoying it for what it is, and then realizing it's not real. So you can let all of that happen without it affecting you, because it's a pretend thing. And it's kind of like that in life, really, as well, isn't it? If we let all of those things be and not judge or disagree or try to put this on them or take this on her, then we would be open all the time to being able to be in that spacious, open awareness of emptiness.
Yeah, it's sort of like, you know, we need to develop an open mind and an open heart, really. We need to practice that. I mean, that's basically what bodhicitta is about, an open mind and an open heart. And that's very, very important.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we tighten up, you know, and we push things away. I want to get to this. This is stanza 34, which I don't believe we got to. And I'll just explain what is. Here's what it says: when something and its non-existence both are absent before the mind, no other option does the latter have. It comes to perfect rest from concepts free. Okay, so what this is saying is, eventually, when the mistaken view that we have of true inherent existence of phenomena and the true inherent existence of emptiness, when neither of those appear to the mind in our when we're thinking or in our meditation, since there can be no other aspect of true inherent existence, the mind will abide in the resulting pacified state in which all conceptuality has ceased. Now we're talking about high levels of when you're on the path and experiencing, meditating on emptiness and experiencing the realization of emptiness. The mind will abide in the resulting pacified state in which all conceptuality has ceased. When the mind continues to meditate upon this reality for a long time, eventually the Dharmakaya, or what's called the truth body of a Buddha, in which there is no conceptual activity at all. Take that in. The mind of a Buddha has no conceptual activity at all, will be realized. So here we go. In his commentary, His Holiness the Dalai Lama says the stanza is referring to the path of the Bodhisattva, which culminates in the enlightened state of Buddhahood. By repeatedly developing and improving our awareness and understanding of emptiness, we will eventually come to realize that all objects and occurrences, including emptiness itself, are utterly lacking in any kind of independent self-existence. First, what we need to do is receive instructions from in the appropriate written treatises in the text from a trusted spiritual mentor and guide, a trusted spiritual teacher. In this way, we'll gain an understanding based on the verses of the texts. This understanding comes as a result of both listening to the teachings and then reading those texts ourselves and contemplating, thinking about them, just thinking about it, reading them and thinking about them. And through that, when we repeatedly do that, we investigate and we have this repeated thinking about these teachings and texts, a sense of certainty about those texts will arise in our mind. We will, based on our logic and our comprehension and understanding, will become quite clear that this actually makes sense. This must be so. I'm feeling more and more certain about this. This requires an extensive understanding of the view that all phenomena are empty of inherent existence. This understanding of emptiness, in turn, depends on us developing our capacity for concentrating, not being scattered, to be able to focus, to concentrate. When we've done that, we can eventually gain understanding through meditation focused on the view of emptiness, and it will be stable. In order to gain that perfect certainty, His Holiness says, it's probably necessary, and it's interesting that he says probably, it's probably necessary to have the support of meditative concentration, or what's called samadhi, in which full mental alertness and sharpness is maintained in a state of calm abiding. If the mind has little stability or little capacity for single-pointed concentration, he says it's unlikely that one could deeply ascertain the emptiness of an inherent nature of all entities for longer than a fleeting moment. So this development of understanding and concentration and ascertainment occurs as part of the Bodhisattva practitioner's spiritual progress within the context of what are termed the five paths. And we talked about this in Shantideva's 8th chapter on meditative concentration. We talked about the five paths you go through, and His Holiness brings it up again. We actually enter the first of these five paths of the Bodhisattva's trip to enlightenment when we reach the point where our minds become so habituated to bodhicitta, so habituated to bodhicitta that the mere sight of an ant or a bird or another person or any other kind of sentient being makes us say to ourselves, when will I ever become enlightened for the benefit of this being? That our heart just automatically goes out to whatever the sentient being will lay our eyes upon. How long until I become enlightened for the benefit of this sentient being? That's when we actually enter the first of the five paths.
You know what's interesting about that? I think we all can say we've experienced
informally, sort of like caring or compassion.
Sure.
But this is much different.
This is taking it, it's what can, when am I actually going to do something? Not just feel bad, or feel compassionate, or feel caring.
It's more like when a mother's watching your kids play in the playground, always you're automatically, I want to keep this kid safe, I want to help this.
Right,
kid.
it's very much like being a mother.
Socially adjusting, I want to,
It's like being their mother, it's like being their, you want to help them. You want to help them. And you want to help them help themselves, right? I mean, it's not like a mother doesn't want to just always, well, some mothers do, they never want their kids to leave and they want to, huddle with them. But a good parent always wants to raise their children so that they will be able to take care of themselves, so that they will be able to be happy for themselves, that you provide them everything they need to have a fruitful and successful experience of living. And that's what bodhicitta, that's what we want to be doing with every single being we see. So this is a big step. This is when we actually just enter the first of the paths. So at the present, most of us are still struggling with our own afflictive emotions, not to mention our less than stellar generosity, ethics, and patience, to be able to achieve much more than a kind of fabricated bodhicitta, which requires the effort of our reasoning and analysis. However, and I heard this yesterday from Kavita, the achievement of one's success in anything does not require being perfect to begin with. So that's important to remember. No matter what we do that's going to be successful, it doesn't mean that we have to be perfect
the way I
from
said,
the start.
Success does not require perfection.
Doesn't require perfection. So we start where we are. We start where we are, and we know that we can progress. But to just not do it because we think, I can't do this, I'm not good enough, I'm too afflicted, is not a good excuse. It really isn't a good reason. We actually can do this. So with the persistent application of logic and reasoning, coupled with an open heart and mind, our bodhicitta will continue to grow and strengthen to the point where it will become clear to us that we are firmly positioned on the path to liberation and enlightenment. The first of the 5 paths of a bodhisattva is called the path of accumulation. It's actually 3 paths in one. There's a lesser path, a middle path, and a greater path, in which the aspiring bodhicitta gradually develops what we've called sonam, this positive potential in your heart and mind. It's translated as merit. And it builds up in somebody who practices with a good heart imbued with wisdom. It's not just enough to be compassionate. You have to bring the wisdom into the compassion so that it actually will be effective. So what this first path is about is developing. It's called the path of accumulation because we're accumulating this sonam and this wisdom that go hand in hand. We're building it up. And it says that it can take a really long time because it requires an enormous amount of merit and wisdom to do this. But as Holiness says, as I've said before, bodhicitta, if it's genuine, is so effective that you can quickly move through this path of accumulation. The second path is called the path of preparation. And in this path, the dualistic appearance of subject and object, I and everything else that's out there, becomes increasingly more subtle. We increasingly begin to see that there's just a very subtle connection between what I'm calling I and everything else that's out there. It is the I and everything that's out there is dependently coexisting. It's dependently arising. The I depends on it, and it depends on the I. So it becomes more and more subtle in this second path. So finally, at the initial moment of perceiving emptiness directly, then, the bodhisattva enters the third path, which is called the path of seeing, in which all the dualistic appearances, even the most subtle ones, are completely removed. Then, like water pouring into water, there occurs an experience with no sense of distinction between subject and object. In the fourth path, called the path of meditation, the bodhisattva, what I'm doing here is I'm going to take us all the way up to the experience of Buddhahood, and which is kind of wild, and we probably will stop there because we will need to discuss it in the next session. In the fourth path, called the path of meditation, the Bodhisattva becomes more and more familiar. Remember, meditation, gom, means familiarity. You're familiarizing yourself with emptiness and dependent arising. The Bodhisattva becomes more and more familiar with their realization of emptiness and uses that realization to cleanse their mind. They are in the process of eliminating what are called the obscurations to liberation from cyclic existence, which are called afflictive obscurations. And what these are afflictive emotions, and our negative karma. We're removing those obscurations to liberation from cyclic existence. And we're working on removing our obscurations to omniscience, the omniscience of a Buddha. And the obscurations to omniscience are called cognitive obscurations. And these involve the mistaken belief that these three spheres, which I was talking about before, the subject, the object, and the action, the I, the object of the I, and the action the I takes in relation to that object, the belief that these things are inherently existent. When a non-conceptual realization of emptiness occurs to the Bodhisattva while in deep meditative absorption, all their conceptual elaborations are subdued and pacified. They're sort of gone. All concepts leave the mind of the Bodhisattva during meditation in this particular path of meditation. But when the Bodhisattva arises from that meditation, those conceptual thoughts come back. The dual appearances, they come back. So it's only when they're in meditation that they have everything goes, no conception, and they are completely free from it. But when they're out of meditation, the appearances come back. Finally, there occurs what His Holiness calls diamond-like concentration. It's the first I've ever heard of this, diamond-like concentration. Diamond-like concentration acts as the direct remedy to one's cognitive obscurations, the obscurations to omniscience, okay? And as a result, with this diamond-like concentration, omniscient wisdom arises. When omniscient wisdom occurs, the Bodhisattva reaches the fifth and final path called the path of no more learning and achieves the enlightened state of a Buddha. Once omniscient wisdom arises, all conceptual elaboration and activity vanishes and it never recurs. The mind has no other object to fix on, no ideas like it is empty or it isn't empty. All conceptual thought and activity is brought to complete stillness. This is in a Buddha, when you become a Buddha. This is a state of equality, unceasing and unborn, which is the very character of space. There is no name for it. It is beyond thought and explanation. It is the unmanifested, inconceivable aspect of a Buddha that is given the name Dharmakaya. The Dharmakaya is called the truth body of a Buddha. It's referring to the the emptiness of the Buddha's mind. It's the sphere of wisdom awareness, the fundamental ground of consciousness from which Buddhas arise and manifest for the benefit of others, and to which they return after their manifestation dissolves. So when we were reading this in bed, and I was reading this thing to Kavita, and she's going, and I was questioning myself too. Buddha has no concepts. Well, how do they help? What do they do? And Kavita says, "What is this? A zombie Buddha?" So she came up with this term, zombie Buddha, and we're going, it just can't be. It can't be. This does not make sense. How could you go all this way and then just be? No, I have no concepts. I'm just sitting here in groundless space. We don't. I mean, we're trying with our conceptual mind, and trying with words, which are concepts. Trying to, His Holiness this is coming from His Holiness's commentary. Trying to explain what it is when you become a Buddha. So you have to sort of hold on. Sort of put the zombie Buddha idea just on a shelf and keep going. And where are we? Okay, we have 1 minute. I'll just what I'm going to do.
I have a thingy I want to say.
All I'm going to do.
Before we dedicate.
All I'm going to do here is just leave it there, but say where Shantideva goes next with this. At this point in Shantideva's discourse, he brings in this dialogue with the lower schools, the realists, the ones who have this view of there is inherent existence, which the Chittamantras do, the Vibhashikas, the Sautrantrikas, they all say there is something that actually inherently exists. So they all say, they all put forth an objection to this, this idea of what a Buddha is. They say, if a Buddha has no conceptual mind, then how can a Buddha possibly teach the Dharma to sentient beings? It's contradictory to maintain that a Buddha has no conceptual thoughts and at the same time can teach the Dharma. And so we're going to leave that as a cliffhanger. Leave it there, that question, for us all to sort of think about. Zombie Buddha? Can't be. So we'll leave it there. So you want something
I
before?
wanted to, one of our Dharma friends, of course, many come and go over the years, but some of you may have met Peter Gonzalez Falcon.
He was a friend of Mr. Washington's.
And he's been in this very room on more than one occasion. He's loves the Dharma, loved being part of this Sangha, even though it wasn't a regular thing. He passed away. And so I thought it would be nice to just, when we do our dedication, for Peter and our other Dharma friends, specifically from our that have passed away.
That have passed away. Hope keeps them in our
right
minds.
now in the middle, if the teachings are correct, then he's in the middle of negotiating the bardo and his consciousness.
His
Any
intermediate
messages we can send his way are helpful.
Great idea. Let's do that. Okay.
Oh, and the other, well, you know.
When did he pass? When did he?
I think it was like last week or something like that,
Yeah.
because that's when we first heard about it, last week from Donna Garrett. All right, so the dedication prayers.
If you don't,
You know,
I don't know who he was, very handsome guy. He would sit over there, mustache. He had been an actor, and I know he was in some Italian films in particular, because I was his friend on Facebook.
yeah, he wasn't here that often, so you probably, I don't doubt you guys would remember him, but in this instance, let's go ahead and in thinking of Peter and others who we know who have recently passed, let's again say these four immeasurables. May all sentient beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all sentient beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all sentient beings be inseparable from the happiness that is free from suffering. May all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free from attachment for friends and hatred for enemies. So may this Varro experience that not only Peter, but many other beings are going through, may this be a very, very positive and beneficial and fruitful one for them all. Okay, dedication prayers. Let's do the two at the bottom of the second page. Since we're talking about these are exactly the topics we're talking about. We'll do it in English. May the precious Bodhi mind, not yet born, arise and grow. May that born have no decline, but increase forevermore. May the view of emptiness, not yet born, arise and grow. May that born have no decline, but increase forevermore. Okay, and there we'll have to leave it. And we're past 12:30, so I'm gonna stop this recording and we'll go to the Tibetan. Great seeing you everybody on Zoom.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here and hope to see you all next time. I'm going to sign out now.